Welcome back to the Marriage Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, Daniel Thompson. We're continuing our deep dive into Pastor Kwame Akiampong's insightful book, 50 Definitions of Marriage. If you missed the first episode, we explored the idea of marriage as a living thing. Today, we're moving on to Chapter 2, and let me tell you, this one is just as profound. Daniel, are you ready for this?
I am, Sarah. Chapter 2 is titled, Marriage is a Family, Not a Firm. No one gets fired or gets to quit. It's such a powerful concept, and I think a lot of people need to hear this perspective, especially in today's culture of cutting people off so easily.
Absolutely. Pastor Kwame has a way of taking these timeless truths and presenting them in a way that feels so fresh and relevant. So let's dive in. The chapter begins with a striking comparison. Marriage is like a family, not a firm. Unlike a job where you can quit or get fired, a family is permanent. Daniel, what stood out to you in this analogy?
What really struck me is how Pastor Kwame points out that you can unfriend someone, but you can't unfamily your brother or sister. It's such a simple but profound truth. Marriage creates a bond that isn't meant to be easily broken. That's why divorce is so messy. It goes against something that's naturally irreversible.
Right? And I love how he describes the mystery of family. He uses the example of how a seed grows in fertile ground. The farmer plants it, but they can't control how many leaves the tree will have or how each fruit will show up. Similarly, marriage sets so much into motion that's beyond our control.
Yes, like how his daughters became sisters. On the surface, it looks like Pastor Kwame and his wife made that happen, but he points out that they were just witnesses to a miracle. It's a beautiful reminder that there's a higher authority at work in how families come together.
Exactly. And that's why he emphasizes the permanency of marriage. It's not meant to be something we enter into lightly or with an exit strategy in mind. It's a one-way street. But let's not ignore the complexity he mentions. Life isn't always straightforward.
I think one of the most practical points in this chapter is about tackling marital problems with the mindset of permanency. When you believe that marriage is for life, it changes how you approach conflict. You're not looking for a way out, you're looking for a way through.
Yes. And for those who aren't married yet, Pastor Kwame challenges readers to make the permanency of marriage a shared belief with their future partner. That's such a crucial conversation to have before saying I do.
And I appreciate his sensitivity toward those who've experienced divorce. He makes it clear that divorce doesn't devalue you or your family. Life is complex, and sometimes things don't work out the way we hope, but that doesn't mean we're less valuable.
That's such an important message. Too often, people carry shame after a divorce, but Pastor Kwame reminds us that our worth isn't tied to our marital status.
So true. This chapter provides a lot to reflect on. For those married or considering marriage, the essence of viewing marriage as a family invites us to think differently. Families, unlike firms, are built on unconditional love and mutual support.
You know, imagining marriage as a family can also shift our perspective when challenges arise. Instead of seeing another point of conflict, you're engaged in a journey together. It's about how can we rebuild and grow, rather than how can I exit from this situation.
And relating back to the gardening analogy earlier, if you think about it, we don't know how a planted seed will grow. Some marriage seasons may bring storms, while others may bask in sunlight. However, the commitment remains. It's the understanding that we're in this together, cultivating growth.
What a comforting thought. And just to reinforce this permanent aspect, one might think it's daunting, yet embracing it can actually be freeing. It allows for a foundation of trust because you know that no matter what happens, you're in it together.
Absolutely. When you acknowledge the permanence, you prepare yourself better to face conflicts instead of viewing them as a reason to leave. Let's take a moment to think about the impact our words and actions have, right from our wedding vows, which establish our intent to uphold the bond we're creating.
Wedding vows are significant. They're promises that anchor the marriage. However, as Pastor Kwame highlights, marriage also invites unexpected change. Remember, it's not just about changes rooted in conflict, but also around growth together, learning, and evolving.
Exactly. Each experience shapes your narrative as a couple. It's often through challenges that deeper bonds are formed, adding layers to your individual stories. It's beautiful how the journey intertwines, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And no story is without its rough patches. But knowing that you're part of a family, a unit, reminds you that it is a shared journey, not one you walk alone. That unity can be the strength to overcome hardships.
Reflecting on this chapter, it sounds like embracing the idea of marriage as a permanent family allows us to process both the highs and lows in a mature light. It's about looking at it holistically, rather than in isolated pieces of time that we call crises.
Well said. Chapter 2 of 50 Definitions of Marriage emphasizes a profound reminder. Marriage goes beyond a partnership. It's a family. And just like family, it's meant to be permanent. If you're married, thinking about marriage, or even reflecting on past experiences, this chapter is one you don't want to miss.
Absolutely. The idea of marriage as a one-way street might feel daunting to some, but it's also incredibly freeing when you embrace it. It shifts your focus from how can I get out of this to how can we grow together.
And if you're enjoying these conversations, make sure to pick up a copy of Pastor Kwame Achiampong's 50 Definitions of Marriage. It's filled with wisdom, practical advice, and fresh perspectives on marriage. And don't forget to subscribe to the Marriage Conversations podcast for more discussions like this.
Until next time, remember, marriage is a family, not a firm. Let's treat it that way. See you next time, everyone.